I'm a professor of geography at the University of Winnipeg and have been here for, this is my 36th year. My specialty is climatology and especially the prairies. And uh, of late, for the last 6, 7 years, I've been co-director of the Prairie Climate Centre at the University of Winnipeg, which very much is in my wheelhouse because at the Prairie Climate Centre, we're trying to get the message out about climate change, not only to prairie dwellers, but also to all of Canada. Initially, we started off as just dealing with the prairies, but we quickly realized that what we want to do is get a message out in the way that we send out the messages to all Canadians about what they should expect with climate change in the coming decades and what they can do about it. The big message in our major tool at the Prairie Climate Centre, which is the Climate Atlas of Canada, the online Climate Atlas of Canada, the big message that comes out of that is that the prairies are going to get warmer, even more so than they've warmed already. That's the most obvious thing about climate change, formerly called global warming. Climate change is more inclusive. It's that the prairies have been getting warmer and will continue to get warmer in the coming decades. It somewhat depends, it absolutely depends on how much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases we add to the atmosphere in the coming decades. But no matter whether we really get serious about reducing our carbon emissions, globally, or whether we don't do very much, it's going to warm. Hopefully we're smart enough to keep the emissions down so that the level of warming isn't as much as it could be. But a sobering thought is that Canada as a whole is warming at about double the global rate. So in the media or in the reports, if you hear about the world is going to warm by another degree, well, that means Canada is going to warm by another degree. So across southern Canada in particular, double the global warming rate. And that includes the prairies. For the Arctic, it's about 3 times the global rate. So no matter whether we really get serious about reducing our emissions or whether we don't, there's a large amount of warming coming. Hopefully we can reduce it. That's the thing that we, as climatologists and those who operate the models, are most confident about, that it's going to get warmer. The prairies have already warmed substantially over the last 50 years or so. We in the prairies especially notice that in the winters. Yes, we still do get really severe winters once in a while. We will always have cold temperatures in the winter, less so as we go forward in time. But the winters have really warmed and the winters have really shortened. And of course, we've had some really significant warm events in the summertime of late. And this is a sign of things to come, because we aren't going to just have warming in the winter, as we've had mostly so far. It's going to spread into all seasons. Indeed, if you look carefully at the numbers, so if you look carefully at the temperature records recorded across the prairies, there is a substantial amount of warming already in place. But as a climatologist, I have to say there's a lot more coming. There's a lot more coming no matter what we do. And of course, the other important climatological variable, or one of the most important climatological variables on the prairies, is precipitation, especially to agriculture, of course. How is precipitation expected to change? How is it projected to change? Well, the good news is, or perhaps the good news is, that the prairies are expected to get wetter. And indeed, the world as a whole, the places that are wet are expected to get wetter, and the places that are dry are expected to get drier. The prairies are kind of in the cusp of both of those worlds. We have such enormous amounts of variability in our climate system. We get wet periods and we get dry periods. We will always have that, even more so in the future. But the general trend is that the prairies should get wetter. The prairies are getting a little bit wetter. The prairies should get wetter, except in the summertime. The winter, the spring, and the fall, we're quite confident, and by we, I mean the climate models tell us quite confidently that we should expect wetter seasons in the winter and the spring and the fall. Unfortunately, there's an indication that the summers across the southern prairies will get drier. There's less confidence with those precipitation projections than there is with temperature, but the general feeling right now, or the data rather, tells us that we should expect July and August in particular to get drier. And so think about that from an agricultural perspective. We're very confident it's going to get warmer. It may get drier in an important part of the summer. And so at the time, just at the time when the temperatures are really high, the precipitation may be lower than we currently have. And as a climatologist, that screams drought to me. That is, we should expect more droughts, even more so than we do already. And at the same time, precipitation is expected and being observed to be more intense. That is, even if the total amount of precipitation across the prairies doesn't change, we're expecting it to come down in larger, intense events rather than even rainfalls or snowfalls in the wintertime. It's likely to be more intense. And from an agriculture point of view, that's not very good, because what you want is a soaking rain. You want the rain to soak into the soil, to recharge that soil moisture. And these are the kinds of things that, in fact, are being observed across the prairies. When you talk to some farmers, especially the old timers, if you will, they tell us, they've told me, yeah, it just doesn't rain like it used to. It rains really hard, harder than it used to, and that's not very effective. Yeah, the agricultural community always deals with uncertainty and variability. Kudos to the agriculture community, the farmers on the ground who deal with such enormous amounts of variability, not only in the weather system, but the economic system and politics and so forth. So the farm community is in a relatively good place in dealing with the uncertainty and the variability and extremes that are coming in the climate system. However, there's a limit to that. There's a limit to how much the farm community, the ag community, can cope with the changes. There's also opportunities, of course. The growing seasons are getting longer. That's a good thing, as long as there's water there and nutrients and so forth. This will enhance the kind of, or change the kind of varieties of crops that they can grow, if those varieties are available that are able to cope with dry conditions and extra heat and so forth. So there are opportunities for the farm community, but there's a risk for the farm community, all kinds of communities. And so what the farm community needs to do, with the assistance of researchers and governments and so forth, is get ready for an even more volatile growing realm in the future. Ups and downs, the greater frequency and intensity of droughts, the greater intensity and frequency of floods. This is, again, something that our climate in the prairies, it always throws at us, variability. But if the models are right, you haven't seen anything yet. There's in the decades ahead, especially in the long decades, we're going to see an enormous amount of volatility in the weather system. And the ag community needs to get ready for that. They need to get ready for that. And one variable that's really important there that they need to get ready for, if you will, is water availability. Water is so important to the ag community, of course. How do you deal with a greater risk and frequency of droughts? You store water for those dry times. We need to store more so than we do already. We need to store water across the prairies to be used in irrigation facilities or livestock or whatever it might be. We need to build some more resilience to those water shortages that are coming more frequently and more intensely in the future. And this is being talked about across the prairies and across Canada. We need to do a job of water management. The proposed Water Agency of Canada is one aspect of that. We need to have an integrated system of dealing with water shortages, ignoring the borders and all the politics, if you will, that gets in the way of proper resource management. So hopefully we're smart enough collectively to invest in water management, even more so than we already have across the prairies. So that's an important aspect of that. And just generally, a diversity would help. Farms are much more diverse than they used to be. It seems to me, as an urban person anyway. Farms are much more resilient to volatility in the economic system, the price of grain, the price of livestock, and so forth. But there's a limit to that. And so we need to help our farm community, and the farm community needs to get organized to get ready for those stressors that are coming. Stressors in the global market, stressors in the weather, stressors in the system that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis and a year-to-year basis. And the year-to-year is really important, because if you can't survive 1 year, or if you get hit really hard in 1 year, and then the next year is the same, your capacity to survive that, if you will, goes down. So we need to, and it's easy for me to say, we need to collectively build more resilience into our ag system across the prairies, and indeed across Canada. So one way we encourage all Canadians, including the ag communities across the prairies and across Canada, to think about how they might have to adapt, or how they might have to change their operations to become more resilient, is to look at the data, to be open to looking at the data about what the climate models tell us. And the climate models are our tool to see the future. Are they perfect? No, but they're our best tool. And the Climate Centre uses 24 different climate models to summarize what the climate models say is going to happen across the prairies and across Canada. And we do that at a small scale. That is, to be told that the globe is warming, has warmed by 1.2 degrees already, and it's going to warm by another 2 perhaps, but before the end of the century, that doesn't mean a lot to most people. You have to make it localized. You have to, how are my temperatures, how are my precipitation conditions going to change where I farm, for example? That's what we do at the Climate Centre. We've taken that global climate model data and we've downscaled it and visualized it in a way that's user-friendly. So we encourage all communities and people to go to the Climate Atlas, go to the part of the map that is where you live, and look at the data. We try to make the data accessible and consumable, if you will. We make nice graphs, nice maps, plain language descriptions. All the details are there, all the hard data is there, but most people don't know how to interpret that. We interpret it for you. And we're very proud of the uptake that the Climate Atlas has had. It gets an enormous amount of hits, if you will, and is used across Canada, including many places across the prairies, by ag organizations and by cities and towns and citizens to examine what changes are likely to happen in the next few decades and beyond, and what maybe we should do about it to try to prevent it as much as we can.